Servus, Matthias Eichler here, and this is Singletrack, your favorite American trail running podcast hosted by a German trail running podcast from America. Either way around is fine, as you, from wherever you're listening from, are all welcome. So yes, I should explain the Servus once more, right? Servus is a popular greeting in the German-speaking Alps that's meant as a friendly, welcoming acknowledgement from fellow travelers who you meet on the trails up to the mountain summit. Well, to celebrate my somewhat goofy intro, I decided to honor the Servus with my springtime shirt drop. As my kids call it, this is catchphrase merch and now available in the store at singletrack.fm. Check out your pod player right now for what the shirt design looks like and get yourself some new gear for spring. Speaking of new gear, the La Sportiva Vento is a $90 windbreaker that's $10 cheaper than your Patagonia Houdini. And just like the Houdini is a windbreaker and definitely not waterproof rain gear. But the Vento packs light and is the perfect layer for running into spring and any unexpected weather the season might throw at you. The jacket features an adjustable hood, breathable underarm inserts, reflective details, and is made out of Blue Sign approved fabrics. It folds small and lets you run fast with the peace of mind that you got a layer on you when the weather turns. This brand new Vento jacket has become part of my must-take gear for every run. Visit sportiva.com, that's sportiva.com, to check out this jacket and the rest of their running clothes lineup, which is all excellent, but which you won't find in most stores that just carry the La Sportiva shoes. Nathan announced something new in the hydration game. The Quick Start 2.0 is a vest that's small, just 3 liters, offers a 1.5 liter bladder in the back, and is made out of soft shirt-like material and has just the right amount of pockets in front to carry the essentials. It's not a vest for burly backcountry adventures, but if you love using a back bladder and want to reduce the vest down to the essentials, this one is worth checking out. The Nathan Sports Quick Start 3 liter running vest. Nathan does make these in 3, 4, and 6 liter capacities if you need something a bit more. Visit nathansports.com for all the info. And lastly, a quick shout out to Coros. They just dropped their prices on their Apex Pro by $100. So now you can get the watch Killian uses for just $400. Not bad. All right, Michael Linscott is back on the show. Last time he was on Singletrack back in August of 21. We chatted about his incredible 5th finish at Cascade Crest, but mostly I received some therapy and licked my wounds after my epic fail at Ultra Tour Monte Rosa 100K. Well, now I'm returning the favor. I'm here to listen to his DNF report at the Badger Mountain Challenge a couple of weeks ago. So, to tell his story and make some plans for the rest of spring, here's Michael. I do feel a little bit guilty that you asked me about Lumberjack, and I'm like, it's going to cost you something. We got to record an episode out of it.
I want you to look into Joe Biden for me.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Well, I just thought it was really cool to capture this conversation. Because I'm an entrepreneur and I desperately want to monetize every second I can, even though my podcast isn't monetized. No, but because I had Keith on an episode on the show like a couple weeks ago, and you had mentioned Keith as we were chatting, and then I had Jason, the race director for Badger, on. So there's sort of a continuation in this conversation, and at the same time, you were there for me 6-7 months ago when I came back with a big DNF at Monte Rosa, and we chatted about it. And here you are back on Singletrack, and you DNF'd Badger. So first off, I'm sorry.
I appreciate it, yeah. I think last time I was talking to you, I was so excited I had finished 10 100s in a row after my first DNF, and now here I am after a DNF. So, joke's on me.
Jokes on you. Yeah, you've done Cascade Crest and you've had big successes there, and that was the other half of the show, and we'll link that in the show note, I guess. And that one went really well, but at Badger the wheels came off. So I think we should just like dive right in and tell the story.
Yeah, it's interesting. 100 milers, there's so many things that can go wrong, and I felt like I had wrapped my head around most of them. Food was well, my pacing was doing well. I was eating and drinking, maybe even better than I expected. But the East Washington is just hotter and drier and sunnier than where I live. I'm running out in 42-degree weather with a short sleeve shirt on, and when it's 50 degrees, I drip and sweat. And all of a sudden, the sun came out at Badger, and I mean, it wasn't horrendous, but 71 degrees, and my body just felt fine. But I think I was just going through electrolytes and salt faster than I could keep up. I was down in ginger ale and apple juice and Red Bull and Gurus and gels. And then all of a sudden, about mile 35, I just started peeing about every 30 or 40 minutes. Just clear pee. Just every time I would go down a hill, my bladder would say, I'm full again. And that's not a good thing when you're only a third of the way through 100 to start peeing clear. You want to, that means your body's trying to flush something out. And I rolled into mile 50 I was still at 22-hour pace, and I thought I'm just going to relax and not think about the time and try to recover while the sun sets. And I downed some food, and it all came back up. The liquids all came back up, and I said, well, I can't sit here forever. So I grabbed some stuff with me and headed out. And about mile 55, I realized I wasn't eating or drinking at all. I hadn't ate or drank anything that I carried with me out of mile 50. Had quit peeing and was still just dripping in sweat, and got to mile 58, 59, and just with my wife was my crew, and just sat with her and was just like, what do I do? I've told myself I'm not going to quit. I've told myself I'm stronger than these things. I can push through. But looking at like the next 9 miles, wandering through these vineyards and across these Jeep trails that I know Jason's mentioned on your podcast, it's not out there like Cascade Crest or UTMB where you're just, but I didn't want to get lost and fall over and pass out in the middle of the night and not have I didn't have a pacer with me or anything. So I sat in the car for about 30 minutes and then wandered off to the aid station at mile 60. And again, for another 30 or 45 minutes, just sat there thinking, I'm not supposed to quit. I'm stronger than this, but my body's telling me that it's a good thing to rein it in right now. And I called it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a really great and concise summary on something that is so hard to control, especially for somebody who's such an experienced runner like you, right? I mean, you're sort of puzzled, like, how did it happen? What did even happen? Yep. And you were fast early on, so you had all the time to sort of check all your system and reset and readjust, and it was just not going to happen, right?
Yeah, I run kind of mentally thinking like a car. If an engine light comes on, you got to deal with it. And I didn't have any engine lights on until all of a sudden they were all on. And you get to, like you said, you get to so far into these races that you're just not thinking straight, and you think you are, and maybe, but when I see people that were 2 or 3 hours ahead of me that were still at mile 50 when I got to mile 50 because they were trying to recover from the heat, that I expected to finish, hours in front of me, or people that I was running with that I passed, and then they, I'm seeing them come in and I'm seeing them dripping in sweat. Their shirts are off. They feel horrible. They're throwing up. I should kind of say, okay, it's not just me. It's everybody. And maybe not everybody. It's a few people around me that I should take these clues and say, what's going on with them that maybe I could learn from them. And I'm looking at other people sweating. Okay, maybe if I just sat with an ice bag on my neck for 30 minutes, or maybe if I just walked and ate and drank. But it's just so hard, like you said, to concisely put all those things together when you're at mile 48 of a 100 miler and you're thinking about, it could have been the next 10 to 12 hours, and now it's going to be suddenly the next 15, 18 hours. And what are you going to do? And is it good for your body? What's the end goal? I don't like to quit, but what's the end goal of a 100 miler? It's to finish, mostly for me, with a smile on my face, enjoy the night, enjoy the stars. And this just wasn't going to be that, but sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. And so you quit before you even headed into the night, right?
Yeah, it was probably 10:30 at night when I quit. And it's funny. I'm thinking, sitting there on the back of my car, thinking, if I quit now, there's probably a place open I could actually go get some real food. And if I go 2 or 3 more hours, everything's going to be closed. And that's something you shouldn't be thinking of. You should be thinking of just getting through the next 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, and in hindsight, in not just in order to sympathize, but in order to sort of really understand what the mind and the body is going through, I'm starting to appreciate my DNFs because
hmm
that's really sort of one of the hard things, right? You run well and everything works, and as you're saying, right, you treat your body like a car. You deal with the little tweaks and pains, and you adjust from aid station to aid station if you need to and stuff. But at some point, you realize that the level of pain that you inevitably go through on these ultras isn't really worth it. And as much as you didn't come to a race to DNF, it's better to fully pull the plug. Even though with you, you've had so much time, like at Zion last year, I've had quite a bit of time at that last aid station where I then rallied just before
Yep.
I felt like, okay, cutoff wasn't really feasible anymore, right? And sort of made it then to the cutoff. But I sat for quite a while. And there I was sort of able to recover for another 2 hours and rally.
Yeah.
But at Monte Rosa, I sat and ate and tried to be in the shade. And even after like 30 minutes, almost 40 minutes of sitting, I just could sort of not right the ship that was
Yep.
off, right?
That's how yeah. I mean, I'm comfortable with going slow, but when I'm walking downhill at 20-minute miles and your brain's dead, but it's still doing math, and you're starting to think of, this is a lot of work. And like you said, it's fun to rally. That I almost wanted. I think I probably should have quit at 50, but those rallies come. Those you can turn it around most of the time, and that's one fun thing about hundreds is there's always something that goes wrong. And the rallies feel great. It feels great when you accomplish that and you push through it and then you continue, even if further on you do end up. But those are the things that we live for when we do these hard adventures.
And yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is that possibility of,
Yep.
of turning things around. And I mean, you're so experienced, so in a sense, it wasn't the chafing or the blisters, and it wasn't an injury. It was sort of a weird combination of heat and sort of food intake. This sort of did you in now with sort of a week out. Have you had a chance to assess a little bit more what went wrong, what you could have done differently?
I think first of all, I needed more heat training. I've kind of, because of COVID and all that, and the gyms being shut down, and now they're just kind of reopening. I used to go sit in the sauna when I knew I had a hot or a warmer adventure coming up. I would, spend 2 or 3 days for 3 weeks in the sauna. I didn't do that. I should have done that. Get your body acclimated to some heat, and that helps for any run. That even helps for elevation. Um, maybe my liquids. I didn't really have any protein or um, fats. And my longer runs like Cascade Crest, you look forward to pierogies, or, at mile 46, or, you look forward to avocado wraps, and you look forward to tater tots at mile 70. I wasn't eating anything like that because I've done Badger when it was cooler and just existed solely on liquid calories. And maybe just liquid calories wasn't good enough for me there. I needed, apple juice, ginger ale, Coca-Cola, Red Bull, Guru just isn't enough. I need some, so that's, maybe. And then the other thing is, like, I sat for a while, and sitting is sometimes good, but once the sun had set, I probably should have just kept moving and just kept eating. Like, instead of sitting for an hour and contemplating my DNF and contemplating how long, I could have just walked for an hour. That's my other. I think I could have done that. But you know how it is. You start walking. I remember you telling stories about wandering through people's yards looking for water out of their hose. You don't want to be that person. But I think that's my. But back to I also sat for a while because I knew that the DNF was going to hurt, and I knew that it, like you said, it wasn't an injury. I wasn't going to wake up the next morning with a sore knee or a bum back or a bunch of blisters or some chafing. I was going to wake up the next morning and probably feel fine. And so I kind of mentally had to say to myself, all right, sit here for a little bit, because this is the feeling that it feels like to have a DNF, because you're not going to remember this tomorrow. You're going to forget all that pain, and you're going to go, why did I DNF? So sit here for a little while and just contemplate how tough this is going to be tomorrow when there's no blisters.
Yes. Oh man. This is rough. I mean, if it's the weather, you said only low 70s, right? That wasn't even that hot. Was it really windy, but perhaps it dried you out more?
It is super dry. It wasn't windy. And it's funny because Badger, I know Jason was on your podcast a couple of weeks ago. Badger's just known for horrible weather. I've bought gloves and, these puffy gloves and extra jackets, just knowing that Badger could fall apart, and it could be super cold and blustery and sleet and rain. And the past 3 years, it's been sunny and dry. So it's kind of mentally not quite what people are prepared for. I should have prepared for it better, but just living in the Pacific Northwest on the rainy side, in the spring, it's hard to train for a race that's just even 70 degrees.
Yeah, no, that is hard, and that is definitely something that I learned a tough lesson too. I mean, Zion was in the 90s when we were there in early May.
And dry.
And it was super, super dry, and that felt something that felt even harder to sort of train for. But I was okay doing rim to rim to rim a few years prior, and so I felt like that it wasn't something that I had to worry about too much. But I mean, as you're saying, living in Western Washington, and you've got this cool, wet, sea level, oxygen-rich air, right? And then you go into other places, and everything gets thrown off.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, I am sorry, Badger wasn't success for you, but you still had fun out there for a little while.
I did. I didn't ever really not have fun. The only thing that wasn't fun is I just knew that like now I'm not happy with the DNF. I still enjoy the punishment. I still enjoy the challenge. I still enjoy. I was listening to your podcast with Keith Yates. People that I see once every 2 years that you get to spend some miles with and catch up. And I haven't seen Keith. He has 2 kids, it's like, so it's fun to be out there and see everybody's faces, especially post COVID. It's great to hang out and, it's just great to be out on the trails and see some smiles. And I do it because I like the challenge, and I also like the nighttime and stuff. And I'm a little sad that I missed seeing the stars come out and watching the sunrise the next morning and stuff like that. So I signed up for another 100 to just kind of, not out of, like, my coach. I have a coach, Matt Urbanski. He said, don't sign up for another 100 with anger in your mind. Don't sign up for revenge. And I said, no, I just feel like I like crossing the finish line. I like somebody, handing me a buckle and smiling and thinking about all the, the nighttime and the thoughts that go through your head and how it clears your mind and just you've accomplished a challenge. And even though it was only 60 miles, it's still 100K. But I just like to cross the finish line. I think that was my one downside to it. So I signed up for another one, which I think you know about, Lumberjack.
Yes, this was my big makeup race too. I do, before we dive into Lumberjack, I do want to quickly touch on what your coach said, because I think that was really smart. And then what you sort of, how you processed what he sort of challenged you with, but then how you come back. I think that was also really interesting. That, I mean, you weren't injured, so you didn't have to really reassess your training or completely reset your body and nurse yourself back, if you will, right? And and at the same time, you had trained for 100-miler, so therefore you felt good, right? And that training needs to go somewhere. And I think then to be able to sort of take all of that energy, and the way you're talking about what you love about 100-milers is going into the night, going into that place, right,
Yep.
where we just never are at, right?
No. Yeah.
And sort of get rewarded then the next day with a sunrise and stuff. I think that's a beautiful way of talking about these experiences from a very sort of non-competitive way. I love that.
Yeah. I wish people could experience, because I know running a 100-mile training for a 100-miler is really hard. It takes a lot of work. Some people don't have the time. Some people don't have they have families, and I'm lucky I can squeeze in the time. But I wish a lot more people could feel that feeling of crossing a finish line at 6:30 in the morning, after 26 hours of being out on the trails and seeing all that without going through, the months and months of training that it takes to get there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, I think the answer for making this more accessible is the 100K distance. And then you can play with start time.
That's true. Yep.
Right? Because if you have 100K and you would start it in the afternoon, then everybody gets to run through the night, the fast and the slow ones. And you would sort of make it in the next days. You would get the sunrise, because that's sort of where I'm at. Where I'm like, the 100K distance gives you almost everything without the complete brutality of the 100-miler.
Yeah. Yep. I have a friend, Gretchen Wallace. She puts on a couple races that are twilight races. So they start after the sun sets. And partially it's fun to run, and she does these races. They're like 2.5-mile loops. So you can run one loop or 50 loops, as long as you finish before the sun rises. So it gives people, and ladies as well, especially, to, a chance to go out and run in the night where they're sometimes not comfortable. And, the loop's only 2.5, 3 miles. So, you're going to be back to the aid station pretty soon. It opens up a lot of experience for people to say, oh, I can run in the night. I can put on the headlamp and go off into these trails. And it's so fun. It's so fun.
It is a really cool way. I was just talking in the previous episode with that German ultra runner Hannes, and we were talking about the FKTs and how our sport has not just racing, doesn't just have these very specific events where we're only sort of measuring our sport by how well we do. And I think the creativity in the kind of races we are offering adds to that. And so I'm glad that you bring up Gretchen and her focus on this inclusivity and allowing people to have these experiences, because just what you're saying, I think that is so beautiful, that it's not just about winning. It's not just about the competition. It is about it's sometimes not even about camaraderie, right? Because as much as we love the community, the finish line, it is a big and important part. Let's not kid ourselves. When we run these long distances, they are long times where we are by ourselves, right?
Yep. And sometimes I like that. Sometimes I like having a pacer with me. But sometimes, Badger is a great example. I just love that night of just being on my own and I don't have to talk to anybody for the next 8 hours. That's fine with me.
No, exactly. I think so too. I mean, there is something special about running with someone. There's something special about meeting people on the trail that we've never met before and we become friends, or we as you mentioned with Keith, right, you sort of see every other year or so, right? But there is also something where we sort of learn something about ourselves, where we discover something about ourselves when we do spend these hours by ourselves in our heads, away from distraction of, I should check on my Wordle and I should read the news or so, right? It is sort of a very beautiful time that we get to experience.
It's true, and that's a good point. Like, we get to line up at a start line to race with people that are the best in the business. You can stand next to Jim Walmsley at a start line, or Courtney Dauwalter, but you'll never get, even though you could be a great soccer player, you're never going to get to go out on the field with Cristiano Ronaldo. But so we can do that. We can line up with the best in the world. But on the other hand, we can also do what, kids all across the world do, and just go out and kick a soccer ball. And we can just go out and run and enjoy our sport just for our sport. Whereas like somebody in the NFL or something, I think it's just the game is the means to an end, and ours is the other way around. Ours is to enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And because um, there's so much space in between going out and running by yourself for a 5K to signing up for a 100-miler, there are so many different variations of the same activity, right? And some people do find that freedom to just be able to run by themselves, but then to include this option of races and offering people an experience in trails and environments that wouldn't otherwise experience is incredible too. So I love that entire range that we have there. So now I think we should talk about Lumberjack, because I've run it and you've never run it, so you have all the questions.
Yeah, that's how I think this started. I remember you ran as your celebration race to the 100K, and I think you did really well. And I think it was pretty hot last year, wasn't it? I don't think it was like 100 degrees, but it was hot and muggy, and you finished.
Yeah, so it was for me, it was my makeup race, right? I had DNF'd at Zion, and I had DNF'd at 70 miles, so I knew that I had the distance in me. And a friend of mine won in another tune-up race and signed up for Lumberjack, and I looked at Lumberjack and I said, okay, I don't just want a 50K or 50 miler, I do want a finish. And so I signed up for the 100K with the anticipation of it being sort of a tune-up for Monte Rosa. So Zion didn't work, Monte Rosa didn't work, but Lumberjack worked. And it was Lumberjack is in Port Gamble on the Olympic Peninsula-ish, as for people who don't know. And it's 12 and a half miles. Well, my Strava said 14 miles loops that you run as many times as you need to in order to get your distance. And what's interesting about it is that the race director is very relaxed. So you can sign up for the 100-miler and then finish just with the 100K distance if you're done after 5 loops and you don't want to go for the full 8. And you get an unofficial finish. So, you can say, okay, I didn't just like drop at an aid station. I did get a certain a distance, but you're not officially listed as a finisher. And so I think it was one of the first big races that was fully back last year. I think it sort of was able to take advantage of that lull before Delta really hit in COVID. And so quite a few people were signed up. But I think the combination of probably people rolling over their entries and being undertrained because of COVID, and then a really weird mixture, I think made it a big dropout year where people didn't like fully DNF, but they essentially dropped down in distance, right? They were signed up for the 100-miler and they ended up just going 50 or 100 or, signed up for the 100K. Yeah. And so I think that added to it. But I had a really good day out there. And I think one thing that I was able to fully take advantage of is the fact that I fully embraced having to run multiple loops. Like, I enjoyed being able to know exactly what was coming my way.
Yeah, and you finished third. And don't take anything away from people dropping out. You still finished third in a hot year. But speaking of the loops, so what are the aid stations like? Obviously there's the start finish that's probably going to have a pretty good setup,
there's a big aid session to start finish, and then I think there are 2 more, 2 or 3 more or so. So like every 4 miles or so, there's an aid station. And those are pretty good aid stations in terms of like what you get there. So it doesn't really feel just like a water station. They're pretty good. And the trail, I think that there is a section after like 2 miles, after 1 to 2 miles of the start, there's a section that gets super muddy. They even have a special name for that section. But I was really sort of not terrified, but I was very aware that this section, after people having run this, multiple times, and then going into the night, that the section would get really gross. And so I was sort of preparing myself for that. But that's pretty much the only sort of technical section that's not fun. Everything else is rolling. You know, there is some single track. There is the usual like forest road, rolling up and down and stuff, right? You accumulate vert, but not an insane amount. And yeah, it's fun. It was, as you're saying, it was I think a really humid year, and I don't know what it was that I was completely unfazed by it. Like I didn't mind it at all. I knew that there was rain coming then at the night, but everybody was like, it was so hot, and I was like, was it? Like, which was no, it was weird. I don't know. Perhaps
and sometimes that's training. You know, if you trained well, the heat sometimes just, you know, if you train well and then run within your ability, that heat sometimes doesn't build up.
Well, and I think there was a challenge at Monte Rosa because I think I was just too slow. But during COVID, I really embraced speed walking in some respects to control my heart rate and just get really strong time on my feet. And I think I embraced power walking with poles during the hottest part of the day, and I think that really helped control my heat, that my body just never overheated because I was just very chill during that time.
Yeah. You know, I think that thinking about Badger, that's maybe one other thing I could have done is just preemptively, I'm talking about talk to my coach about this, like I could have preemptively slowed down, but you just don't realize that. I felt like I was fine, but I should have said, all right, the sun's out, I'm sweating. Maybe these, 11-minute miles, 12-minute miles should be 14 and 15-minute miles. And that way, when I get to mile 50, I don't feel as horrible.
I'm very smug about that because I think so many runners feel like they need to run and they're running for pace, and I'm just so comfortable with my 15-minute miles, and I know that a lot of this is very strong power walking, and so some people roll their eyes at me that I even put it as a running activity on Strava. Oh, yeah. Right? I mean, I get the criticism, but I know that in ultra running, so much of it is walking, and if you both mentally and physically are ready for that, then I think you can just embrace this so much more, and you're comfortable with that, right?
Yeah. On my recovery or rest days, that my coach gives me, I'll still go out with my dog and power walk 4 miles, just trying to get under 14-minute miles if I can, because I know those are going to come. And it's like the memes all the jokes. I ran 100 miles, and by the way, I didn't really run 100 miles. I walked 100 miles.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, I've never talked to a coach. I'm not, I'm not really smart when it comes to all of those sports physiology research and stuff. But I do understand that if I'm constantly overheating my heart rate, if I'm just constantly pushing it too high, I'm just getting injured and burning myself out. And so... Yep. As much as I'm not really do this whole heart rate controlling, I do think that in some way I do manage myself that way, especially on really long runs. And I'm just okay with keeping my heart rate in this sort of forever pace. And I mean, for me, with my speed, that just often means power walking, right?
And we've talked about the rim to rim to rim, where I overheated, and I think ever since then, and I'm getting older, I just can't, my body doesn't manage the heat as well as it used to. I think that long day, rim to rim where I overheated, just really lowered my tolerance for heat. It seems like forever. I haven't ever gotten all of that back. Oh, and like I said, I'm getting older, but
I know.
So Lumberjack, so do you want to come pace me for a lap?
Oh man, I would love to.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I mean, this was a little bit my lifesaver. Like, I was very happy with doing it solo, and then on the fourth loop, and the crew out at Lumberjack, they have an incredible community out there. The aid station, especially the start and finish aid station, there are lots of people who absolutely love running and love cheering you on. And as I came in to my fourth loop, finishing my fourth loop in New York, I had one more loop, and the rain started to pick up. It was sort of nastier than anybody would want for a complete nighttime loop, right? And I sat down. I was like, okay, I'm allowing myself to reset. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to DNF. I wasn't even remotely interested in DNF, but I knew that I would take the time to fully reset. I wanted some soup because it was cold and wet out there. And then a friend of mine and friend of the show, Tabitha, asked and said, hey, do you want me to come run with you the last loop? And I just looked at her and I'm like, that's not even a question. Yes. I've never had a pacer in a race, and it's one of those things. I'm a social guy. I like people in general, but as I sort of mentioned, I've sort of come to terms with the fact that based on my speed, I just run for hours by myself, right?
Yep.
And so when she offered, I was just like delighted. And I think she was a little bit confused with my speed because I just power walked it. And so it was too slow for her to run next to me. And I think it was too fast for her to walk next to me. Like, she didn't really know, because I had poles and I was just in this total rhythm of like just crushing it at a very consistent pace, right? But at a very, walkable pace. And so the weather was miserable, and that really, on that last loop, and that really helped with having somebody who, I've never had a pacer before. Right? We came to an aid station, and she's like, as we were getting up to the aid station, she was like, okay, give me your water bottles, and you really should eat this, and you should, I'll take some of this in case you want it later, and so she was just like super, super helpful, and I was like, nice. Oh my gosh, I've never experienced this before, right? And,
on Sierra trail running.
I know. It felt very luxurious in a way that I've sort of never experienced. I've never experienced that before, right?
Yep.
Because I've never had a pacer before, so it was very, very fun.
Yeah, I was thinking of you because Badger, if you quit at mile 50, Jason gives you a finishing medal. And when I left at mile 0, I told myself I'm not quitting at mile 50. I kind of regret that a little because I do like I said, I like the finishing feeling. But the Lumberjack is a little daunting because of that 100K finish. So having you or a couple pacers out there or after that 100K sounds intriguing, because then I can look forward to, okay, I'm not going to quit at 100K and get my, what you call it, like a sort of a finish. I got to keep going because I have people out here that drove over here that want to run with me for 12 miles or power walk with me for 12 miles. So let's go.
Yeah, I think without pulling my calendar up and looking at stuff, I'm gonna just like commit and saying I wanna come out.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I appreciate that, because as I said, I don't know, I've never offered anybody pacing gear, so I always feel like I'm too slow. But then again, if you ask me to pace you for the last 2 loops, by that time you're probably pretty slow too.
Yep, and you like that, and it's always fun to give back to the community. I think I spend a little too much time running and training, and I don't spend quite enough time going back out to the races that I love. I've run Cascade Crest 5 times in a row, and it doesn't look like I'll make it in this year because I'm way down on the wait list, but I should go out there and help. I should go out there and volunteer and help the other runners finish that race. I've paced quite a few times, but I've just never kind of gotten myself into that groove of getting out and helping as much as I should.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it would be fun. This is not too far of a drive, and I'm trying to figure out what time probably would be the early morning hours or so by the time you hit mile 70, 80 or so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you explained it, because I look at the ultra sign up for previous years, and I was a little queried why there was so few finishers last year, and the times were really slow. I mean, I was looking at Badger, I was thinking of 22, 24 hours, and then I said, all right, well, I DNF there, let's look at Lumberjack, and I saw like the fastest time was 25 or something. Thought, wow, that's a lot slower race than I thought, and those ups and downs slow people down, and it's more in the summer. But then I looked back a few years ago, there were some faster times. I think a professional runner came out a few years ago and did like a 17-hour out there. But
yeah, I mean, by the time I hit the fifth loop and it was, pitch dark. I mean, this first muddy section that I described, I mean, I think everybody who had previously run it had said that they've put some wooden pallets down. There were a little bit of boardwalk, so it was better than before, but you are sort of ankle deep in mud. And at times, right? And especially after like the fifth or sixth loop, when people have gone through there dozens of times, right? And it feels like really bombed out. Yeah. And so that's the rough section. And then there was one downhill where I remember slipping, just because it's one of those limestone mountain bike downhills where the mountain bikers want the downhill to be like really slick, so it's really rideable for them, but you basically have no traction, and it's not like I didn't like I just fell on my butt, right? So it's not like I slipped like 20 feet downhill, right? But I just lost footing. And so there are a few of these kind of sections where as you're approaching 100 miles and you're going to have to do this over and over again, right? You sort of need to be aware of. But the course was marked really well. I especially liked the nighttime sort of illuminated errors and stuff, because it is, it's Western Washington. So you're going through a lot of managed forest trails that feel the same and look the same, right? There's not a lot of iconic, okay, now I'm going for 3 miles up this iconic ridge line. I couldn't go any wrong, right? There are a lot of like, am I going left or right here? What's going on, right? So because you're like deep in the woods. But
yeah, I might pop over there and run one loop before the race just to get a feel. I don't really know what those trails are like, and it's hard when you're running that long to kind of comprehend how long you're going to be out there. I know some races, like I was looking at Badger thinking 22 to 24, but I have no comprehension how long Lumberjack will take. So back to our point, maybe I'll see you at 1 a.m. It could be closer to 2 or 3 or 4, but we'll be in touch.
Yeah. No, we'll talk about this. I mean, I'm excited because, I mean, it was my biggest success so far. I mean, I suppose looking at last year, I've always only really talked about my DNFs because those were the iconic races, and Lumberjack wasn't really that big of a deal in a sense, right? But it was a big deal because I did well, and I finished, and I pretty much had it the entire time. Like I didn't.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, no, I felt like if I'm looking back, I don't think I had any blister or chafing issues. I mean, you get fatigued and stuff. But, this is the other thing that's good because of the 12-mile loops and because the start and finish is at a parking lot. You can use your car as an extended aid station, which is definitely something that I took advantage of. So I came through the finish of a loop and went to the aid station to sort of graze and refuel and figured out what I wanted to eat and drink. And then I went to my car. I think I changed my shoes once and, just kind of to use my trunk as what do I really need here, sort of reset, which I thought was good. And I was familiar with that because I often do that for my training runs. Right?
Yeah, we get a little spoiled, which is why this race sounds intriguing to me as well. Because I do love. I'm not into grazing at the aid stations as much as I used to, Just, a handful of M&Ms and some Pringles just don't work for me as well. So it's nice to have my nutrition. So it's nice to have a car there, that you can bring 4 pair of shoes and 18 pair of socks and a jacket and whatever you want. And it's all just there in the trunk. But then you start thinking about, some of the races you've done where you have to pack a drop bag to send to mile 30. That's another beast versus these kind of spoiled, rotten trails where we can, every 4 miles is an aid station and every 12 miles is your car.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this does feel very comfortable and sort of easy to manage and easy to prepare for, right? I mean,
Yep.
yeah, you're at your car and you have to unlock the car and stuff, right? So it's not like you've got, I mean, I've been to aid stations, Quest University at Squamish comes to mind, where it's this gigantic aid station, and they're like, for every runner, 3 helpers, and they're all super excited and willing to do absolutely anything for you, right? And you feel like you're running into this like Formula One pit stop, where you're like, take care of me, people. And so coming to your own car requires a little bit more.
That's true.
Of like, oh, where's my car key? And, you open the trunk and the heat comes out. So you need to sort of adjust for that a little bit, right?
And you're like, who threw all this stuff around? Why is there traffic? Oh, that was me on the last lap.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh man, did I really leave the shoes in the trunk and my socks in the trunk and close the door, close the door on it, and now it smells for the next 3 weeks? Oh man. Well, and you want to do the 100-mile at Lumberjack, not just 100K. So that's going to be 8 loops. That's going to be a lot of loops.
That is a lot of loops. It's good and it's also bad because, when you get to your car and the heat's on, and it's a challenge sometimes versus some of these other races where you get to mile 75 and they say, there's 25 miles to the finish and there's no bailouts. So this is you can quit every 12 miles. There's an opportunity to quit. So,
yeah, I think the mental game that you need to play of saying, okay, I need to go out is the challenge. I felt that the ability of knowing what was ahead really helped me. Like, I appreciated that. I was like, okay, I know after this section comes, after this section, I have to go up this hill, and then you make this turn. It's like, like 2 a.m. You're like, really? I'm taking a left turn? I could have sworn it was a right turn, right? And so you're sort of playing with yourself a little bit. But I remember how hard it is, and I don't know. I don't think I'm a really good map reader before a race. I try to focus on everything but really getting into what the route is going to be like, and trying to, even if I look at a map and an elevation profile, I'm like, how much does an elevation profile really matter, right? But when you have these multiple loops, then you just know, well, I know exactly what's ahead, and I just have to check this off, right?
Yeah, one less thing to kind of worry about.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it can almost be fun and something to look forward to, right? It's like, oh man, bombing down this section, I'm going to have to do this one more time or 2 more times. So I'm looking forward to that or whatever. So I think it's good.
Yeah, like, back to your point, we have so many different races and so many different ways to go out and challenge yourself. You have some that are just point to point out in the woods. You have some that are 3-mile loops, some that are 12-mile loops, all sorts of things. I think somebody said that we're in the golden age of trail running with all the opportunities we have right now.
It feels that way, and as much as we are trying to sort of shoehorn it into a format, which mostly is distance, I think that the diversity that is given to us based on time of year and terrain and region and stuff, I think allows us to sort of experience a whole much more. And I mean, you just can't run that many races a year. It's not. Yeah, I mean, there are some people who are into the half marathon, 10K half marathon distance, right? And they sign up for a race every weekend, every 2 weekends, right? That's sort of what they do on the weekends. They travel around the region and they just check off all of these races. And I mean, I'm not criticizing that. I think it's terrific. But we as ultra trail runners, where the races are is farther apart, and the distances require more recovery and stuff. And so I think there is more of a challenge to try to, each one becomes a little bit more of something unique.
Yeah, agreed. Which is I like, because I like the challenge of going out and training too. It's hard when you race every weekend, or I used to be in Marathon Maniacs, and trying to get 14 marathons in a year or 52 marathons in a year, or it just seemed daunting to me because there's no time to go out and have fun. And, if you have a long trail race that's every 6 months, then it gives you 4 or 5 months of going out and training and being with your friends and being on the trails, and then having that goal, and then kind of recoup and recover and start over.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Anything else? I'm trying to remember if there's anything else Lumberjack related that you should know.
It's good to know about the community out there. We live in Washington, and I kind of get just Seattle, but there's so many great communities just in Washington of trail runners that are so supportive. There's East Side runners. There's down in Richland with Jason and Badger Mountain. He does like 4 or 5 races. There's down by you with your races and your community. So it's interesting to know that just on this little kind of peninsula, Olympic Peninsula-ish, there's another community of people that love trail runners.
Yeah.
And they've been around, and Lumberjack's one of the oldest 100-milers in Washington State. I think it's one of the first 4 in Washington State.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, it is cool. It's an accessible loop in a sense, so it makes sense. And yeah, the Evergreen Turtle Rockets and sort of that Polsbo running shop. I don't know if I said the name correct, but I think it's sort of organized and birthed out of there. And yeah, speaking of food, I remember hitting coming out the third loop or so, and they had like stacks of pizza that had just arrived for the volunteers. And I come to the aid station and look over where the volunteers eat pizza, and I'm like, I'm gonna have some pizza. I'm not just happy with a handful of chips. I would like some pizza.
Yep.
So cool. All right. I think
all right.
Yeah, I know, right? I think we have a date, right? I think
we do.
We'll talk offline and get this organized and run some laps at Lumberjack. Looking forward to that.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely, Michael. This was great. Even though it started off with you sharing about a DNF, which I guess we have to do a redemption run together, I think, right? So that we are not just always talking after DNFs. That wouldn't be a good idea.
Right. And and DNFs are good every now and then. It's good to know our limits and that we're doing something hard.